Ho, ho, ho! I'm retired NYPD Detective Vic Ferrari, and welcome to NYPD Through the Looking Glass podcast, where you'll find unique insight into the New York City Police Department. Before we get started, I encourage you to check out my Amazon author page, where you'll find my series of behind-the-scenes NYPD books. They're $10 paperback, $2.99 ebook download, including my latest NYPD Presumption and Dysfunction. Christmas is coming. Tomorrow is Christmas, so if you forgot or you're falling behind, go on Amazon, check out my Amazon author page, click on a book. It'll be there in a couple of days, and you can blame it on shipping. So before we get to this week's story, let's hit the New York Post true crime section. A Guatemalan migrant, which is an illegal alien, was arrested for allegedly lighting a sleeping subway rider on fire in Brooklyn on Sunday morning, then watching his innocent victim burn to death. The savage killing happened about 7:30 a.m. on an idling F train at the Coney Island Stillwell Avenue station. As the train pulled into the station, the suspect calmly walked up to the victim, who was seated in a subway car, and used what we believe to be a lighter to ignite the victim's clothing, which fully became engulfed in flames in a matter of seconds, Police Commissioner Tisch said at a press conference. Patrolling cops smelled and saw the smoke, then followed it to a flame-covered woman, the commissioner said. A transit cop walked by and seemed to pull out a radio and say something as he continued down the platform. After the cop passed, the suspect got up as to walk away, then the clip cut off. The suspect brazenly sat on a bench as cops huddled around, pulling his hood up at one point before an officer spoke to him. "Do me a favor, walk down there," the cop said, motioning down the platform with his radio. "I need this space cleared up." The man stood up and then left the scene. Later in the day, 3 high schoolers called the police to say they saw the man pictured in the images released by the NYPD. The cops called ahead and halted the train at Herald Square. Then they went from car to car until they found the suspect and arrested him, police said. You import the third world, you get the third world. And this animal should never have been in the United States. I've watched the now deleted photo. This guy, it's the most bizarre and horrific thing I've ever watched. You've got this woman standing up in a subway car, kind of hunched over, and she's in flames. This guy is just kind of sitting on a bench, like literally maybe 8 feet from him, watching his handiwork. And I hate to second guess cops, I really do, but I watched the video, and from what I saw, you've got a cop walk by the platform, walk by the subway car as this woman's burning alive, and he just kind of glances, walks past, and pulls out his radio and keeps walking. I don't know, take off your jacket and throw it over her, knock her on the floor, try to knock out the flames, call for help. It just was so nonchalant. I don't know. It's just such a bad look. It's a bad look for everybody. It's a bad look for the city who allowed this to happen, making it a migrant city. It's a bad look for the NYPD. And then you can't believe these politicians. So today you've got the governor, Kathy Hochul, who was on the subway today making videos telling people how safe the subway is. Meanwhile, she's got 5 state troopers from her security detail following her around everywhere she goes. I'd love to see her take the A train from Inwood down to the Rockaways one night by herself and see how that goes. I just couldn't believe watching that video. Those teenagers should be, they should get an award or something for spotting that on a video and within hours notifying the cops to get this savage arrested. And I'm watching that video, and I see that cop walk by with that stupid skull cap on his head. Now, they allow him to wear it. I get that. But the NYPD uniform now has more variations than NFL teams with their different throwback jerseys. I get it. I didn't like wearing that 8-point hat, but it looks a lot more professional than those skull caps that make the cops look like one of the 7 dwarves or a garden gnome. I don't know. Maybe I'm turning into that old man not on my backyard, but I don't know. It's just a bad look for the NYPD. A drone dropped a mysterious glowing object over Staten Island neighborhood, and the NYPD took the matter seriously enough to do 4 flybys over the area, according to a retired NYPD detective who reported the strange scene. The alarming sight unfolded around 6:15 a.m. on December 14th, while John Scotto was having his morning cigarette, he told the police. I said it was an object with a small white light, said Scotto, 59 years old, who was sitting on his Rossville porch when a 7-foot-long, 2-foot-wide rectangular drone popped up over the treetops of thick woods just across the street. Scotto, who retired from the NYPD in 2006, said the drone had red and white and green flashing lights and moved slowly. no faster than 20 miles an hour. Based on its size, I'm sure it was a military drone, Scotto told the Post. It was no toy. It dropped out of the drone, it went straight towards the ground and really fast, Scotto explained. It immediately just took off and dropped out of sight. Well, here you go again with these drones. Obviously, the government knows what this is. I don't know why they're tormenting people with these things, or they're not just fessing up to what it is. I'm sure they got their reasons, but there's smoke, there's fire, and there's more and more reports of this. And I believe the cop, he probably definitely saw something. The NYPD cracks down on air horns, confetti, as stupid and unprofessional disruptions at promotion ceremonies. It's supposed to be the NYPD, not the circus, the source said. You've got your family there, and there's some bozo blowing a horn like it's the effing circus. Promotion ceremonies have been typically held at the police academy in Queens, but are moving back to NYPD headquarters at One Police Plaza, downtown Manhattan on Monday, giving cops more control of what can't be brought inside. It's the police academy gym. Of course they have control over it. Their security will have the ability to check for bags, horns, confetti, and face cutouts. Larger-than-life photos of cops being promoted will also be outlawed, the NYPD said. Cops who show up at the academy typically don't go through a bag check. That cop is right. It's an NYPD promotion ceremony, not the circus. And I've gone through when I got promoted. You got to get there first thing in the morning, by yourself, without your family. They inspect your clothing. They make sure that everything is up to snuff. And then they check your shield to make sure you're not handing in a dupe. Air horns and confetti. I've never heard of such a thing. It's really, I can't believe it. A self-described Arizona social media villain was arrested after he filmed himself allegedly spraying bedbug killer on groceries inside a Walmart as he boasted to the police about his prank videos. Charles Smith, 27 years old and old enough to know better, is accused of grabbing a can of Hot Shot Ultra Bedbug and Flea Killer and unleashing the pesticide on a series of perishable items in the Mesa, Arizona megastore around 8:30 on December 19. In the now deleted video, I'm sure he did delete it, the influencer filmed himself wearing a black hoodie and pink bandana while spraying the toxin on bananas, acorns, squash, tomatoes, lemons, green apples, and Roma tomatoes at the store located in the neighborhood of Southeast Phoenix. As my late father would say, this guy needs a kick in the hole. I mean, these social media influencers, I get it. I got a podcast and I want people to watch it, but you're gonna harm somebody to get clicks? I don't get it. This next story kind of dovetails what I said last week or the week before about politicians trying to get criminals out of jail. President Biden on Monday commuted the sentences of 37 of 40 men on federal death row, a list that includes at least 5 child killers, several mass murderers, and a stunning act of clemency just before Christmas. Ho, ho, ho. Christmas came early for Anthony Battle, who murdered an Atlanta prison guard with a hammer in 1994 while serving a life sentence for raping and murdering his wife. A U.S. Marine, Jorge Avila Torres, sexually assaulted and stabbed to death 2 girls, Laura Hobbs, 8 years old, and Crystal Tobias, 9 years old, who were riding their bicycles in Chicago in 2005. 4 years later, he strangled naval officer Amanda Snell, 20 years old, inside her barracks in Arlington, Virginia. Iori Mikkel, another clemency recipient, was convicted of murdering 5 Russian and Georgian migrants after kidnapping them for ransom, which in some cases he was paid before he killed them anyway. Caboni Savage, meanwhile, was convicted of committing or ordering the deaths of 12 people, including 4 children, as a Philadelphia drug dealer, while James Rohn Jr. participated in the murder of 11 people as a drug dealer in Richmond, Virginia. What did I say about they didn't just let these people out. These people had friends of friends and friends of lawyers writing pardons, and somebody that's a huge donator to that party. Oh, can you do me a favor? Can you get this guy out? I mean, do I really think this guy knows what he's signing? No, but it's people that are putting it in front of him, telling him how wonderful he's going to be for letting these people out. Well, they're commuting the sentences, so if I'm understanding this correctly, they're taking them off death row and giving them life in prison, which then that starts the clock. Then they're going to try the next step is to get their sentences on compassionate release. It's just unbelievable. You do something that horrific, which I just read down a laundry risk of animals committing these horrible crimes, and now you're going to start the clock on trying to get them out. So This story is from last week when I was talking about that overtime queen. Alleged in a Howry. An NYPD lieutenant detailed how the department's hulking top cop preyed on her financial and emotional vulnerabilities repeatedly, sexually demeaned her in his police headquarters office, according to a new complaint. Quethesia Epps was facing foreclosure and desperate to keep her home. The first-time chief of department, Jeffrey Madry, asked for sex, she claimed in an exclusive interview. Now, she's under investigation and she's doing interviews. He wanted to have anal sex, vaginal sex, and oral sex, said the mother of three. Epps, 51 years old, made headlines for being the NYPD's top earner at $400,000, which included more than $200,000 in overtime. The chief, the highest-ranking uniformed cop in the force, demanded unwanted sexual favors in exchange for overtime opportunities between June 2023 and December 16, 2024. Oh, just the other day. According to an equal opportunity employment discrimination claim filed by the city on Saturday. I think he's a predator, Epps said. He wasn't just demanding sex. He was forcing Epps to do odd favors involving other female officers, according to the complaint filed by her lawyer. The EEOC document is a precursor to a lawsuit. Epps worked as an administrator for Madry as he moved up in the NYPD from chief of housing to chief of patrol. But his alleged sexual demands didn't start until June 2023 when he became chief of the department, responsible for the entire 36,000-member force, Epps alleged in the complaint. He told me I could do whatever overtime I needed, Epps recalled. In lieu of all this, NYPD Chief Jeff Madry resigned on Friday. During his time on the force, Chief Madry became close with New York City Mayor Eric Adams, both of whom were members of the NYPD's Guardians Association, a black fraternal organization that met at the South Oxford Tennis Club in Clinton Hill, Brooklyn. He has been hit with a myriad of lawsuits and disciplinary investigations, including accusations of sexual abuse and harassment by at least 3 other NYPD subordinates in the NYPD. You want to talk about the hypocrisy with this? So first of all, any NYPD member, cop, detective, sergeant, lieutenant, if you get too many civilian complaints, now that's just civilian complaints. Somebody said you gave him a ticket you shouldn't have, abuse of authority, discourtesy, even if they're nonsense. If you get too many of those things in your folder, nobody wants you. So say you're a cop doing your job and you're in a busy precinct like the 4-6 or the 4-4 or somewhere in Harlem, and you're doing your job. You're locking up drug dealers, you're chasing them from the corners, you're interrupting their business. And they start making civilian complaints on you. And you go down to Civilian Complaint Review Board, and let's just say you're found not guilty or unfounded of all these things. They still sit there in your jacket, right? So now you want to go to RIP, Robbery Identification Program, or you want to put in for narcotics, or you want to put in for auto crime or vice, right? The first thing they're going to look at is what they do is what's called a round robin. A round robin is a interdepartmental background check, right? If you have too many civilian complaints, even if they're unfounded, they don't say, well, this guy is doing his job. He's a go-getter. He doesn't know how to talk to people. You know what? I don't want that guy. And it will keep you from getting things. This guy became chief of department, and it seems like and if you've got sexual abuse and harassment complaints, you're not going anywhere. So obviously, looks like Mayor Eric Adams somehow, some way helped this guy out. Now you got the now all of a sudden the Manhattan DA's office and the feds are looking into this. If these allegations are true, there's going to be, they've opened up Pandora's box with this, because if you think you think if she's the only person in these specialized units up at One Police Plaza that's making this crazy amount of overtime, you're wrong. She was averaging allegedly, 70 hours overtime a week, which I find to be almost physically impossible. Look, after 9/11, UNGA, the United Nations General Assembly, the Republican National Convention, where I had to work 40, 50 hours overtime a week. All right, you're getting up, you're doing 16, 17, 18, 20 hours. You're running home, you're throwing your clothes in the washing machine, you try to get a couple of hours sleep. And when you're working 40, 50 hours overtime a week, I'm telling you that with that sleep deprivation, I remember getting into my car and wondering how I got to the second location. Like, I don't even remember. Like, I could have killed somebody. That's how out of it I was. Food doesn't taste right, and she was doing 70 hours a week, and she's 51 years old. Okay. Maybe she's a marathon runner. I've also heard through the grapevine, and I don't know if it involves these people that I just mentioned, but I've heard from the grapevine there's another investigation going on at one police plaza that there quite possibly in one of these units was a pay-for-play scandal that's about to come out, where you've got people in prestigious positions in one police plaza that if you grease the right wheel or skids, you'd get a favorable promotion, or you get a promotion to grade. Like if you were a third grade detective and you knew somebody and somehow paid somebody off, you would get promoted to second grade or first grade. Or if you were a sergeant, you would get lieutenant's pay or commander's pay, whatever that thing's called. Again, I don't know if it's these people involved, but I did hear from someone in the know that told me that there's something, a lot more of this coming down the pike. So that got me thinking about overtime and working all this overtime. It's funny, and during my time with the NYPD, whenever there's been a couple of big scandals in the NYPD that have been unleashed as a result of people making a lot of overtime. I got nothing against people making overtime if they're putting in the work, if they're making arrests or being where they're supposed to be and doing God's work, make your overtime. But I've also seen things come unglued when people make too much overtime, because then the department goes, well, hey, what are they doing? And they start looking at it. So I got a couple of stories about it. So when I was a rookie cop working in the 4-2, I was miserable, and I put in for Bronx Task Force, which is a borough-wide unit. And I was told, oh, you're going to love it there. And then I got there, and what I realized was they had just recently had a house cleaning. Like, you had a lot of overtime, you had a lot of old-timers there padding their pension, making a lot of arrests, making a lot of overtime. But allegedly they were making so much that they sent in this borough lieutenant as like the hatchet man to kind of get rid of them, make it uncomfortable for them, transfer guys, bust up partners, so these guys would either leave or retire. Or if he could get something on them to screw them, he would. And there's a couple of cases with this. So some of the stories I heard was there was a couple of guys in the DUI unit that were making so much overtime that the lieutenant wouldn't let them go out on patrol. And a couple of these guys would do car stops in front of the building and actually arrested a couple of guys on foot for DUI. And since they didn't have a car, they basically arrested the guy and drove the guy around the system in his own car. So say you get pulled over drunk in your Toyota Corolla, what these cops did was they placed the guy in arrest, they brought him into the precinct, they processed him, then they handcuffed him, put him in the back seat of his own car, took him to Highway 1 where he was tested for drunk driving, and then they took him down to Bronx Central Booking and lodged him in his own car and told him, all right, we'll leave the keys at the desk. Your car is at the precinct. So obviously they were making so much overtime that they started messing with them that they had to get inventive as far as transportation. Then there was another guy that was making a lot of overtime that got on this commanding officer's radar. And somehow I think I don't know if it was on duty or off duty, he had injured his leg or his arm, and he wasn't, he was out restricted. And, they had a hard-on for him. They were really coming after this guy. And what they found out was he was a jockey at Yonkers Raceway with the Trotters. And I heard two stories. One story I heard was Internal Affairs was following him. They follow him to Yonkers Raceway, and they see him. He's out on restricted duty, and he's in the back of one of those chariots riding Glowworm in the 5th. The other story I heard was the ICO, which I kind of believe because this integrity control officer was relentless. Supposedly he was a horse player, and he was at Yonkers Raceway because he lived in Westchester County, and he sees this guy in the winner's circle, and you're on restricted duty. You're supposed to be home injured. And I don't know if I don't know if he got 3/4 or they forced him off the job or what. This is 30 years ago. But again, if you bring attention to yourself with the NYPD, they're really going to come after you. But there was another cop in that unit who was a young guy. He's only a couple of years older than me. Sharp as a tack, made a lot of arrests. I try to get this guy into the auto crime division. You can make a movie about this guy's career. Just a sharp cop, used to work midnights. But before he did midnights, he worked in this unit. And he was making a lot of overtime. And the ICO started grounding him and, taking his car away from him and stuff. So One day, this cop got called upstairs to the ICO's office, and the ICO basically, that's it. No more overtime, blah, 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 blah. So the cop went downstairs, and everybody's, what's going on? What's going on? So he goes, all right, just come out into the parking lot. So the cop is out in the parking lot telling the other cops what just happened. And the bathroom on the 4-7 precinct, so the 4-7 precinct, it's a brutalistic architecture. It looks like an old Russian KGB fort, and the windows kind of slide, like they go kind of slide out sideways. So this cop is in the parking lot telling the story about how the ICO just clipped his wings. And he said, yeah, he goes, that little guinea prick just clipped my overtime. So all of a sudden, the bathroom window slides, and the ICO was taking a piss. And he sticks his head out the window, and he goes, I heard that. And he says the cop's name. He goes, and this little guinea prick wants to see you in his office. So the cop had to go back into the precinct, walk upstairs, and he goes, pick your precinct. So the cop told him he wanted to go to like the 4-6 or the 4-4 busy precinct to make overtime. And of course, he shipped him to the slowest precinct in the Bronx. Another overtime scandal, which kind of started the ball rolling on these guys, was in the mid-90s. 4-8 precinct had a lot of good cops. I did my field training there. I'm still close with a lot of guys that work there. Great cops, great precinct. You ever call for help? And I was a rookie there, and they were really good to me there, and I liked those guys. And, I would run into them down at court and stuff. So I would bump into these guys, and they were making crazy overtime, like 50, 60 hours a week. And I'm like, they're letting you work that kind of overtime? Like, yeah, nobody seems to care. Well, that opened up a can of worms. So now they're watching the 4-8 because of all the overtime they're earning. And you've got 2 or 3, it was actually at least 3 real dirtbag cops on the 4-8. 2 were partners, and what they were doing was they were ripping off drug dealers. They were either, stopping guys on a corner, tossing them. Guys got $5,000 on them. Where'd the money come from? I'm going to voucher this, kick them in the ass and keep the money. Well, the drug dealers started making complaints on these cops. That brings IEB in. IEB is watching them, and they catch one of them. I think the way they caught these 2 guys was they had an undercover, an IEB undercover in a car that was like a studio with cameras and everything and sound, and they had like drugs in the car, and they also had a large sum of money in the car. And I guess they must have called a gun run on the guy. Guy parked in a car in a corner, and then you call a gun run. It's in their sector. Somehow they were able to direct these 2 dirtbag cops over to this guy. They toss him. They come up with the money, and they steal it. So again, this is 30-something years ago. They caught one and not the other. They caught them both. Either way, they flipped them. And now these 2 cops are wearing a wire on the midnight. And, you got all these cops making crazy overtime. And I've stated this before, midnights in an NYPD precinct in a busy neighborhood, it's big game hunting. I mean, nothing good happens after midnight, right? You've got cops, cabs, and drunks moving around at night. That's, you got a lot of bad people out there. And these 2 cops, what they would do is they would try to provoke guys into doing things or do things right in front of these guys. And what wound up happening is when the NYPD, when they have corruption in a precinct, they don't come in with a scalpel. It's not like a dermatologist that just kind of cuts out the mole. They do chemotherapy. They throw a grenade in there and yell fire. They don't yell fire in the hole. And then what winds up happening is good people kind of get swept up into it. Guy running his mouth, a guy exaggerating, a guy taking a shortcut, and then you've got a prosecutor involved. They don't want to hear, well, the guy made a mistake, you're going. So when they took that case down, I think they locked up 16 cops, or the Nets grabbed 16 cops. I don't know how many were arrested, how many were put on modified assignment. But I knew 2 of them. One guy particularly well, we went to high school together. We carpooled in the police academy together. Really nice guy, not a troublemaker, not a big mouth. Actually, he wasn't that active. He worked with an active guy, but he really wasn't one for making arrests. He did his 8 hours. If he had to make an arrest, he went home, but he wasn't out there looking. And one of these cops said, these dirtbag cops that was wearing a wire said, one night, before he was wired, when he was getting debriefed by IEB, he said, one night I was working with this guy. We pulled up, we stopped a drug dealer. I took money off of him, and the other cops saw it. I didn't give him any, and he didn't say anything about it. Well, they take that case down, and now my buddy gets placed on modified assignment. He didn't get arrested, but he got placed on modified assignment. And they shipped him off to another Bronx precinct. And he sat in that precinct answering phones for years. It wasn't just like 2 or 3 years. It was like 6 or 7 years. This kid's life was in limbo. And I used to bump into him because I used to make arrests in that precinct all the time. And he used to go, Vic. He goes, you know me. I'm not I go, listen, dude, you don't have to explain. I believe. He goes, I got people walking away from me. Because that in the NYPD, especially, unless you know a guy real well and they get in trouble, everybody starts walking away from you because they don't know now, are you wearing a wire, or are you going to make something up about me to save yourself? So thank God he was able to retire. He did his 20 years, but, you know, really good guy. He was cleared of all charges, thank God. But, you know, they basically dragged him through the mud. Another guy I knew, and I don't agree with this, but he had like 5 or 6 years on me when I was a rookie in that precinct. Like anytime I needed help or something, he came over and helped me and stuff. I thought he was a good guy. What wound up happening with him was on a midnight, I don't know if they were called to a gun run or something in a hallway. I don't know exactly how he recovered this thing, but he found a machine gun left behind somewhere in an apartment or in a hallway or something. And he's like, wow, I always wanted one of these things. Instead of vouchering it, sending it to the lab to see if it was involved in a homicide, he decided to take it home. One of those 2 dirtbag cops that he was working with knew about it. They told Internal Affairs. I think they did a search warrant in this guy's house when they took the whole thing down. I think they recovered the machine gun. He wound up doing, I think, a couple of years federal. Dropped off the face of the earth after that. But it was a perfect storm of these guys making a lot of overtime that brought a lot of scrutiny. And then you had these 2 or 3 dirtbag cops. And another one from that midnight shift was a guy that lived up in Rockland County. He was so brazen enough. I'm pretty sure I think he was stealing drugs down in the Bronx, and then he was selling it up in Rockland County. So, you know, it breaks my heart when I hear things like that because, when you see a bad cop, when you see a good cop go bad, or cops just going bad, I mean, it shakes the public's trust in the police, and it's tough enough, you know, with all the enemies we have out there. But anyway, I want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas. And as always, I want to thank everyone for tuning in, especially my listeners in Grand Blanc, Michigan, Orange, California, Alexandria, Virginia, Hackensack, New Jersey. Hey, Hackensack, do you still have that little submarine there that you can go on a tour from like World War II? Lake, Wisconsin, and Brooklyn, New York. If you work in law enforcement or have an interesting criminal background, please drop me a note on Twitter or Instagram at VicFerrari50 if you'd like to be a guest on the show. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit the like or subscribe button. If you enjoy the content, check out my Amazon author page. Type in my name, Vic, Ferrari like the car, where you can preview all my NYPD books for free, including NYPD Presumption and Dysfunction. Merry Christmas, everybody, tomorrow. Have a great holiday, and hopefully I'll have another episode up before the new year. Take care, and God bless.